All right, so welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about reimagining education. Specifically, I'm going to give you some updates on this contest. We were nominated for the contest, and as we talked about last time, it's a little daunting to be, one person involved in the Following Walls is such a big honor and a big program that I wanted to be part of a larger kind of working group where everyone had a chance to contribute something. And so we made a lot of progress last time where we went from this being, a game where students could learn world history in the context of this game to it now being this kind of what Vlad said, a never-ending story, to it being very open-ended, to Ben's point, role-playing fantasy, whatever a student wants it to be, bringing in their style of learning, whatever conforms or goes along with their style of thinking so that they can contribute it, feel good, feel confident about what they're contributing. And so if you didn't get a chance to read this part, I'm just going to read it out loud again. Simply put, this project is trying to solve the problem of how content is delivered to students, but it also works on the problem of what kind of content we choose and how it will be absorbed by the students. As I learned from 7 years of observation and research, we simply learn better when interested in a subject or when in charge of the method of how we learn. There's something going on there. And we had also talked about when the onus of responsibility is on, the individual, and when they feel that they're making a contribution, it changes their attitude around. So what I thought we could do today is we'll introduce ourselves, and we can come back at the end of the conversation to some of the mechanics of what we have to do between now and when the judging panel finishes looking over all the materials. But for now, I'd like to just get your thoughts on this and what we might do to really make the best go of this. And who we have some new people today. Afzal, are you still there? Oh, it says he's waiting. Interesting, okay. I'd let him in and now he's waiting. Sorry, you guys, I didn't know it was going to be like this.
It's like this for everyone all the time. Everyone. I don't know if I've ever been to a Zoom meeting that actually started on time.
Oh yes, I was.
Okay, Afzal, are you able to get video?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Welcome to our global panel. I'm really happy to see everyone here. This is very diverse, although I think it could be even more diverse. So certainly, Sandra, if you have some women friends, please invite them to join us, because the more perspectives, the better. But we have people here with different talents and abilities and background. And so if you could just introduce yourself when I ask, calling your name, and tell us a little bit about your area of interest and what you could possibly contribute to this from your perspective. So maybe starting with Sandra, because this is your first meeting.
Yeah. Hi to everyone. I'm living in the Netherlands. And what I have been working on all my life, and so that's of course, my interest also, is the development of people. The last years I came to realize that if you want something for the students, you have to really be busy with how to teach it to the teachers. So if a teacher is not willing to reflect on his or her interests, development, etc., it's never going to work in the classroom. So I'm busy talking to teacher trainers, teachers themselves, what to them is the most important thing they like to contribute to the teaching of students. And well, so, and I have very interesting conversations with them. So my contribution would be, what's the role of the teacher introducing this whole new and very creative and interesting idea you have there, Lee? And what do they need to do with their own prejudices, ideas, fears, creativity, to really be able to put it, to make it work in their own work in the classroom? Is it clear what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So we may come back to you at some point during the general discussion to ask you how the role of the teacher changes, or how training might need to change in a role play fantasy or game-based environment, or a self-organized environment where you're no longer controlling so much, you know, from the top down, but you're facilitating.
That's it. The whole change, I see it here. We have in the Netherlands also a discussion on education, and the whole point is to change from top down to bottom up, and to see the student as a subject, and that whole change is difficult for people.
So before we move on to the next person, would you be able to just highlight a few things about your career so people know your background?
Yes, I was a dropout of high school and started again, also because of this whole thing, that I had to also listen to the teachers, and no one was asking me anything. I started studying again and became a teacher and a counselor. And after that, I became a coach for teachers and principals. I coached many principals in their work, and I did big projects on the whole thing that I just described, learning to reflect, etc., teachers and principals. And I work together with people here in the Netherlands in changing the education.
Okay.
And now I'm a core group member of European Bildung.
You were one of the founding members, right? Of the
No, I came in 1 year later.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so I may be asking you some questions later about how this connects with the Bildung philosophy as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So Demetrius is new. I know you've been out sick, but do you feel okay to introduce yourself and talk about your background?
Yeah, I just, I'm late now because I'm sick, just because I overslept. So, all right. So yeah, nice to be here. My background, so I guess my career started in as an international education development specialist in China. I'm not going to go into too many details on that because this is a recorded meeting. And the fact that I'm saying that, you probably get an idea of what I might have been doing. And then right now, so I've just started working at a school in Sacramento that is focusing on closing the African American achievement gap. So that's the gist of it at the moment. And yeah, I generally agree with Lee's philosophy of education. He follows a constructivist model. So yeah, so I would say I'm an applied constructivist in the sense that there's the everything's constructivist, but there's obviously the applied method of pedagogy, which you do that. But that's all I have to say at the moment. That's all I could think of off the cuff.
That's good. Yeah, I would love to pry into some of those stories about China, but I share some of those concerns, even though I was only there for 3 weeks. And by the way, Demetrius helped me out of a crucial situation when I was over there. I was running into some, I'll just call them difficulties. And I went to him on Facebook through a VPN, and he was very helpful in helping me to communicate with our director. We'll just leave it at that. And Ethan is joining us. He is a sociology professor, and he's here for the first time. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but since you're here, did you have anything you wanted to say about your background or interests? If you could, oh, there we go.
Yeah, hi, thank you. My name's Ethan, and I'm a relatively new professor of social work at the college level, university, master's, and bachelor's level. I came to working as an instructor through doing policy organizing around affordable housing and homeless services, and seeing the need to connect universities with ongoing grassroots projects for change. And so I teach in a social work department. My goal is to develop people who work towards change of large systems. And yeah, and I'd like to be funneling money from institutions into community-based work.
So when you, if you don't mind me asking, when you talk about working towards change of large systems, are you talking about the internal structure or the way that that system interacts with the community? Because you talked about funneling money into community programs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in the area. I'm still working in the area of affordable housing and homeless services. And so I've been trying to help our department be a resource in the community for making sure people don't live outside. We have quite a few of them. And so students are pretty fired up about that. And it's a nice way to get, I don't know, many people are international. I'm of the philosophy, we have homeless people because we allow there to be homeless people. And some of your countries don't allow that so much. So anyhow, so those are the systems change work that I talked about is leveraging university resources to influence our homeless services or approach to homelessness in Sacramento.
I should mention, and I hope Ben doesn't mind, but Ben's brother does housing services in Sacramento. He's doing it privately. He left his public job to do this, to match homeowners with people who don't have anywhere to live. So I don't know if you guys are interested in connecting later, but who would like to go next? Vlad?
Sorry, yeah, sure. So yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, you can call me Vlad, and together with Sandra, I'm also a member of the European Bildung Network. And one good thing is that we are also now promoting global Bildung, like we're trying to become a global movement as well. And let's say in my daily basis, well, I used to work for the Swedish government, but I recently quit my government job, so I can focus on completely on social entrepreneurship and decentralizing projects. So right now I'm very much focusing on promoting ideas around liquid democracy, which can be described as a kind of a digital democracy where people can delegate their votes to individuals and organizations, but also co-create solutions because you can mobilize higher level of knowledge. It's actually an idea coming from United States, historically seen, like end of 1960s. And I'm also focusing on one cryptocurrency community called Seeds, which is special because it's operating on the basis of climate transformation and ecological development, sustainability, and so on. So the idea is to create like a decentralized, both democratic and economic system, as for, let's say, permaculture, food production, but also, let's say, social projects like integration of refugees and helping people who are, let's say, homeless and so on. So yeah, I usually say that I'm like a social entrepreneur, and I'm also, when it comes to this development on my hobby level, I'm also like a let's say retro gamer. So I do love gaming, and I'm very fascinated like that you can combine gaming and education, because I think that's how future should be. That for me, it's like hard to imagine that like in, let's say, 30, 40 years, like people are still gonna, when you say that you go in school, that you're still in a building, with classrooms and educational stuff. I think that we need something new for our world. So that's a little bit about me. So thank you.
Oh, well said. And that ties into something that I hope to get to, which is that we can build that into the 2.0 version of this game, so that students are not only learning the content, but they're solving actual problems in real time, offering solutions, and even potentially earning points that convert to some type of currency for a college fund or for a fund for the school. And so I'm very open to some of those ideas, many of those ideas. Ben.
Yeah, hi. So my background is I was a PhD student at UC San Diego for about 7 years. And while I was there, I was studying very kind of randomly. I got interested in playfulness as a concept, and then I went all the way down the rabbit hole. So my time there was kind of all spent trying to look at playfulness across a whole range of scales. So kind of going all the way from the very experiential, person-centered kind of accounts all the way up to the evolutionary scale. And I think what I came out of it with is, there's even within sort of progressive circles that might be, feel positive about making, the classroom more fun. It's often approached as a quality of life issue. And so kind of, I think this my big theoretical axe to grind is that, no, it's not, let's put it this way. If even if playing wasn't fun, we should still make it happen, because it has properties to it that can't be generated any other way, that are core to our existence as mammals, and that are crucial for our success as a species, basically, both in the short term, across every scale. I'm also, I'm a lifelong gamer, mostly board games, traditional board games, and fantasy role-playing games such as Dungeons and Dragons. And I think those are providing us with a lot of really great models now to rethink what winning can mean, let's say. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so that brings up a couple of interesting things. One is that my question is, I was initially attracted to doing something like this based on a board game, which was, the world conquest game called Risk, because we all loved playing it, and we made various adaptations like double atomic risk and moving the board around, changing the value of the dice. So we kept doing variations on this. And I know Ben brought this up last time, that you brought up a story on cricket in is somewhere in the Pacific, and I wanted
And
to
yeah,
opportunity to clear that up for everyone on the
to
adaptation.
redact something. So
Yeah.
those of you who weren't in our last discussion, I presented an anthropological anecdote in which after I fact checked myself, I had gotten some details mixed up. So the big the big thing I got wrong there with the case of Trobriand cricket is that what I told you guys was that the game always proceeds towards equality. And that is actually not wrong, correct. The home team always wins. That's their model. And it really is very much, you asked me about, is there a cultural context that this kind of reimagining is happening with? And the answer is yes. The British introduced cricket specifically to basically replace and suppress traditional warfare practices. So a lot of these places around, you know, the Nesias, right, Melanesia, Polynesia, all that stuff. There's cycles of warfare between tribes are very patterned, very predictable, and often pretty, you know, unpleasant. So the British colonizers came in and said, "Hey guys, instead of doing that, play cricket." And they took it up, but the intervention that happened is that, you know, the British expect them to just accept the rules as they were, and you know, to their thinking, like, okay, this is a competition, and we have our understanding of what competition is. Warfare must be is a competition. Cricket is a competition. They must analogize perfectly to one another. And the Trobrianders had a different idea of both what games are, but also what warfare is, right? And so they produced something utterly unlike, you know, what we consider to be cricket. So that's that correction.
Well, so in the original version, you were telling us that they came up with a version so that no team would get too far ahead, so that if you scored a point, they had to get rid of one of the runners.
Right. So basically, that part was kind of right, but with the thing that the home team must win, basically. So as the game goes on, they make these adjustments to things so that over time it's inevitable that the home team wins, right? And that's to mirror the cycle of warfare. So they kind of, you know, you take in the warfare cycle, you kind of take turns attacking each other versus, you know, going on the defense essentially. And
equilibrium.
And exactly. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, very different cultural area, but very similar kind of material. There's very, I think, fascinating big work by this guy Roy Rappaport, and so he kind of describes a very similar kind of set of institutions in New Guinea, which is one of these like places where you have very isolated tribes. You have, you know, the sort of laboratory, if you want, for primitive people, and how that their warfare cycle is directly tied to their ecology, essentially, and it has to do with keeping a proper balance of pigs and humans. And yams, and those three things have to connect correctly, you know, and how warfare is what makes it work. So I think it's, you know, it's a really masterful work of analyzing a full system, right, and just saying, okay, here's sort of the rules of the game, here's the reality of what it takes to grow yams and raise pigs. And here's what happens when you put all these pieces together. And his big argument is taking it all to say what we need is a new religion, and that you know that our ecological crisis needs a new, complete, holistic way of reimagining the world. And you know, he's calling that religion, right? That's the only thing we know of that's really going to. Anyway, sorry. So yeah, that's
no, that's okay. So that does bring up a good point that they also want to get to, which is something that came out of our last meeting, is that this doesn't have to be a zero-sum, winner-take-all binary system. We want to be very clear that we could end up with 100 variations of this. And I thought about this a long time ago, that every class and every student and every school could take the basic framework that we design and create something similar to what Ben's describing, something that feels right for their learning situation. And I think it'd be fascinating if we had a central site, like a blog, where students from one part of the world can say, here's what we adapted. This is our variation. This is something that we're proud of contributing to the world. And then you get, because to me, and I forget which call I was on, I've been on a lot of these Zoom calls, the idea being that there's over 7 billion people on the planet, yet there's thousands of problems we still haven't solved. And I think that's just a matter of allocating all the resources that we have to those problems. Well, we have a great resource in our students. And I don't see personally any philosophical problems with tasking students with, let's start thinking about some of these. Let's make this part of the curriculum. We could solve some of these things in real time. So we'll come back to that, I hope. Afzal.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, depending on wherever you are. My name is Afzal Rasheed. My background really, my interest is education, mostly sense making in general, because I think all the decisions we make and the choices we have in life are based on the way we make sense of the world. So I think the better sense making we have, the better decisions and choices we have in life. As far as my background, I'm an attorney by training, and also I've studied economics here. But my work has focused, I worked with the California government, but also I've worked in Afghanistan in education sector. And also I was a policy advisor to Dr. Ashraf Ghani, who is the president of Afghanistan right now. I still have a nonprofit organization I'm on the board, which focuses on education and sustainable development models. And also here I'm in an organization, Immigrant Integration and Empowerment, which focuses on, again, educating immigrant population here to, assimilate in this society and be empowered to get a job and be kind of productive. I know Lee from the meetings we have had, and had a lot of conversation about education, and agree that we should kind of change this model of education, from what it is, so all students can be accepted and learn. It should be based on learning, not teaching, which is the model I think Finland and some of the Northern European countries follow, and some in India follow. I'm fascinated by the group. I'm sure I learned quite a bit from each one of you, and see if I can contribute anything. So that's my background.
Thank you, and thanks for joining. Finally, Roderick and Sarah, whoever.
Okay. There's a phrase in England, it's not cricket. That means that something is not the way it's supposed to be according to the rules of society that are not written. So I think what we're doing is going beyond cricket. Because that was from your description, it seems like neat that you were, this thing was to stop a lot of very unuseful behavior, and then replace it with another thing that now needs to be replaced with something else. I spent tedious hours not playing cricket and sitting being bored. My interest is basically in dialogue, real open dialogue, and in people learning how to host, how to charge a room with energy or an area with energy that allows people to be open-minded. I've noticed in all the different dialogue systems, well, let me backtrack. In terms of play, I've been doing improv for 32 years now in many different forms. So when you deal with improv, the actual things that are available as the main kind of discussion points, I guess, are kind of ethereal seeming, but they're actually predictable. They're almost like a science. There are observations. You can repeat a certain kind of attitude and things like that and get results that are called improv. You can have other attitudes and arcane little things going on, and they become complete anathema to improv. And one of the main things we have as anathema to improv and dialogue is our history and our conditioning. And I've been working in villaging, which is a way of people getting together in numbers like a village, say. First of all, on the infrastructure and the construction of buildings and how to do it in a way that anybody can do those things. We're now in a situation where you do not have to spend millions of dollars on sewage and things like that. And there's solar. So the second part of villaging is how the hell, once you get a bunch of people together, they don't fall apart, because that's a standard system. And it's part of self-organization to have a crisis. So it's necessary to learn to surf a crisis rather than try and avoid it and end up with hierarchical systems, which a lot of sanghas and other places have been involved in as a way of communication. I know one sangha that fell apart that people had to be taught to communicate laterally because they'd lost that. And anyway, what I'm getting to is that dialogue, if people learn to host a dialogue, I think they can dialogue better. And the point of a dialogue, just like improv, is to go beyond one's own limitations. And my limitations, I know my limitations, and then when I do improv, I find out I don't have some of those limitations, and I'm doing things like I can't possibly do. But the evidence is showing me that I'm doing it at the time. So that's an extraordinary place to be. If we apply that to education, if anybody can be educated, we have, say, instead of thinking about schools, if we're talking about 10 billion people being educated in going beyond our past into something that we can't even conceptualize at the moment. Because like when light bulbs were invented, it was nice because every house could have like a 30-watt bulb in it eventually. But they had no idea of internet or washing machines or anything like that. They were just trying to get a light in every house at nighttime that didn't give you problem from all the smoke. So I think this is one of those open kind of areas where either as a game or as something that we can find another name for that isn't a game, because I've never been interested in games in my whole life. And I think there's a reason for that. I think it ties into the competitive and zero-sum systems. Just because we have all that in our past, you know, how can I talk right now to win against all you people? That's not the way I'm going to learn anything. How can I learn to listen, and how can I learn to be a part of something without having to throw my spear in? Anyway, I don't know if that was vague enough to confuse everybody.
No, it was just.
I totally agree on the dialogue part.
I'm sorry, Sandra?
I said I totally agree on the dialogue part. If we could teach dialogue to every student and they would really know how to do it, would change so many things.
And it's become a matter of survival now, I think. A couple of years ago, when I saw the way that the division was being held, it started in the 70s or 60s, or the British Empire was a great way of dividing and conquering. It's just like, we need to go beyond that, because we're in everything's here that we need. And we're behaving like we're on the bottom of Maslow's pyramid all the time. And that's a created, that's a design.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be.
Where are you, the three of you, where are you?
We're actually in Stockton right now, but we live in Sacramento. Sarah and I live in West Sacramento, and
Okay.
Ethan is
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm downstairs. I'm visiting Roderick right now, so I'm in the downstairs of the same place. It's kind of interesting. But I like the heterogeneous nature of this discussion. If you could see the whole, here that's greater than the sum of its parts, you'll see that you can be talking about a lot of different disciplines, but really bringing it together towards one thing. I just happen to see an opportunity because of this contest to bring it together towards something that could move forward. And we could create something that's usable and that could really shift, the current model. And if you shift the model in education, you could shift it in other areas too. Other top-down organizations might see the power in self-organizing systems or decentralized systems like this. But so we've gone beyond the term game, and we've gotten into, you either call it project-based, or I'm trying to remember that there's a book called Non-Zero, and the author refers to it as non-zero sumness. And so you can create opportunities for everyone to feel that they are, quote unquote, winning in some way, or that they're contributing. And that's the biggest part of this, is that in the traditional model, then maybe this is the breakthrough, in the traditional model, a certain section of every class, a certain number of students are going to feel left out, and they're going to slip through the cracks, and they're going to become, and this reminds me of a very sad conversation I had once with an elementary school teacher, I think, who was in West Sacramento, who told me by the 3rd grade or 4th grade, they can look at test scores, and people will visit from the prison system to get a sense of how many prisons and how many prison cells they need to build based on those test scores. That's absolutely sad, but that has to happen. It's kind of baked into the system. And I just really see this as an opportunity to create something different that's workable. And
are we going to, excuse me for interrupting, are we going to hear from Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just inspired to say something right there. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I will mention about the test scores. My grades were terrible in elementary school and middle school and high school. I wasn't interested. I wasn't allowed to walk at my graduation because I skipped school so much. But then when I went to college, and I went to college for occupational therapy, I was a straight A student because I was interested in the content. And being interested in the material matters. I will say I'm interested in, Lee, your project, because I recently, about a year ago, read, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Sudbury Valley School in Massachusetts.
Yes.
Okay, so it's kind of, it's similar to Summerhill in England. Maybe some more people have heard of that one. But the students are in charge of what they want to learn. So it's a bottom up model there, and it's a totally different way of doing things for school, and it works. And the children or the kids are so self-motivated in their learning, and it's that top level schools are seeking these students out when they graduate, and instead of them having to apply to get into these schools, the schools are seeking them out because of the way, because of all the different skills that they learn. So yeah, once I found out about the Sudbury Valley School, I thought, oh, it doesn't have to be the way how I went to, public school,
Was there anything more you wanted to say about your background and how it might tie in?
Yeah, I worked with kids for about 10 years in after school programs, and I know I get on really well with kids. I know kids. I see what works and what doesn't work. And then as far as occupational therapy, I work mostly in the home health setting. so driving to people's homes to do occupational therapy with them. But I also worked on inpatient in the hospital and skilled nursing settings. And then before that, I worked in a pediatric clinic, working with, kids with actually 0 to early teens, autism, Down syndrome, global developmental delays. And one of the things for occupational therapy is we are constantly evaluating. We're constantly evaluating how a patient is performing a task. So we have this activity analysis running in the background at all times, and how we can give them the just right challenge. Not too hard, not too easy. It's a very therapeutic approach, and we're always aware of what physical demands, cognitive demands, everything is going on at any given time, so we can target exactly what they need to be working on. So I also, during COVID, I took a break from occupational therapy to do a caregiving job for a friend that her mother has Parkinson's disease, and she had really declined, wasn't doing anything, wasn't getting out of bed, and the only thing that she would do was watch TV. When I took care of her for 6 months, and that was the state in which I started working with her. And I knew right away that TV isn't worth living for. So she was extremely depressed. That's why she wasn't wanting to get out of bed. It was terrible. So I knew right away. I started finding things through conversation, through dialogue. I started finding out what she likes, what she's interested in, what she was liking before, years ago, and just really getting to know her. And I started just making a long list of possible activities that she would be interested in, with my help, with a lot of help from me initially, and then less and less and less. But when I finished with her, when I finished working with her, she was very excited. She was excited to start the day. You never know, there's so many choices of things to do every day. Yeah. And we never watched TV maybe once while I was there. And we filled the day with many leisure activities. And I really think that caregiving is really one of the backbones of society, because caregivers, whether you're the children or the grandchildren or a paid caregiver, or, they're the ones taking care of our aging population, and will be for we will be there too. So the way that people do caregiving should be shifted as well, and considering more leisure activities, because TV not worth living for.
Yeah, you bring up a great point too. I always look at these situations, and I think there's so many combinations of possibilities with games and activities. And oftentimes I'll use a matrix where some of you might be familiar with the concept of consilience, the unity of knowledge. There's hundreds of areas of study, and there's so many combinations of things that haven't been tried, like in terms of, something physical with something philosophical, or something, experimental with, bringing yoga into the classroom, or it's just that we fall into these traps, like television as an anesthetic almost, because it's easy. And like there was a whole generation of Americans who were brought up on television because it was a great babysitting opportunity. It was just very easy to keep people, I don't know if the word's placated or whatever the word is, but so I want to open it up to more discussion. If there's anything that we left out or you didn't get a chance to say about your background or your area of interest, say it now before we move on.
I just very quickly wanted to respond to something that Sarah brought up, that kind of a note that's been hidden many times here, and I think it's interesting to expand upon, is having a negative experience at school, right? And that kind of follows you with bad life outcomes, typically, until because our society values that thing called education so much. But one thing it always makes me think of is how harmful it can be to children to do well in school. And there's a fair amount of research about this. There's a famous book called Punished by Rewards that came out some time ago. And as somebody who was precocious in school and fit into the school environment like a hand in glove, you know, decades later, I'm seeing now the ways in which that harmed me through toxic reward structures, basically. And there's some neurochemistry to this. So I kind of like to just throw that in the mix as something to when we talk about equilibrium is an important topic here. And we're talking a lot about emptiness, right? And creating space, empty spaces. And I think that is a nice thing to have in the background here when we talk about what good education looks like, right? Is it necessarily, I guess what to put it real short and bluntly, it's like, do we really want all straight A students, right? Is that kind of on our objective, right? If everybody comes out with something that says you're awesome, right? Is that necessarily the best outcome? I think for me, the answer is a little bit more complex than that. But anyway, just throwing that in the pot, and I'll let you proceed.
Well, it's fascinating to me that here we are in 2021, and we still use this arcane letter grading system that subdivides human beings into these classes where you're an A student, you're an F student. That automatically says one is better than the other, and that creates a profound impact on them. And I know I brought this up because this was my case before, but if you're an abstract kind of learner where you think on a multiple choice test or a standardized test that you're not thinking hard enough, when the truth is you're actually thinking too hard.
Right.
You're trying to be too creative and too fascinating, and you think that's what they want, and then you realize later that's not what they wanted. They wanted something, they wanted to fit neatly, have you use their design. And that wasn't rewarded. Or like you pointed out, Ben, that sometimes you're rewarded and there's a social punishment for that.
Yeah, certainly that's one aspect of it. I don't want to take it up as a huge topic, but I just to kind of clarify the kinds of negative impacts I'm talking about. When you, and this is something that's, I think there's a good body of science behind it at this point. When you tell a kid, you praise them for being smart, right? You say, oh, you're so smart. The kid doesn't really know what smart means yet. They're figuring out still when people make this word smart, what are they talking about, right? And what they learn is that they get that piece of praise when they do something quickly and easily, right? When you're done with your test before everybody else, you're smart. When you get, and basically to learn, the model is to associate success and satisfaction with ease and lack of effort, right? And so what, kind of happens is that the brain itself learns to basically to expect rewards on a much shorter scale, right? So sustained effort becomes harder and harder because you have learned that what makes you good as a person, valuable to society, is that things are quick and easy for you to do with your brain. And I think that's a really important part of, for me, of what needs to happen in education reform, is that this concept of smartness, to a certain extent, be removed from play however you can. And I think the question you're raising is why do we use this old system still, right? And I think that's a big topic to take on. There's a reason for it, right? And it might be one of many things. It could be ignorance, malice, incompetence, lack of political will, all those things. But I think that's a big part of what's worth talking about.
Well, there is one part of this, and I hope you don't mind me interjecting so much. I just have a lot to say on this topic, but and please jump in on me if anyone feels the need to cut me off. But I was talking to a professor last weekend who's the head of his Department of Education at a university in the Southwest United States. And he brought up an important point that we haven't even gotten to because it's controversial, which is the textbook industry. You've heard of the prison industrial complex. There is an educational industrial complex. Mm-hmm. And if you follow the money, I can't speak for Europe or the rest of the world, but in the United States, when you start threatening the major publishers, the textbook companies, and I know it's risky and I feel weird about even saying this on a recorded call that may end up on YouTube. But if you follow that money, it's less likely that legislators or people in positions of power will want to change to a system like this, because I had the students use the textbook because that was necessary for me to maintain my position in the school. So we took the content from that, we inserted it into the game, but ideally we'd want to go way beyond the textbook into whatever types of information students can find anywhere and bring that in and incorporate it. So I don't know if any of you have thoughts about that, but I know there's a political aspect to this.
Oh, absolutely.
This is not so related, but it brought from somebody else's point. One of the challenges our colleagues face in higher education is the nature of remedial skill building. And, you know, one of the things I've heard about is like, how can you allow, or how can we create systems, but even just lesson planning or in the gaming that can allow people to come where they are into them and give a contribution. And so, you know, one of the techniques I guess I've tried to do in group projecting is that people build their skills from other folks. In the educational setting, when you talked about these negative reinforcers, I find that there can also be a resentment that fuels when students are there to be the teachers of their fellow students and colleagues. And so that idea of student and colleague isn't well established through this university system, or even, I don't know how it plays out at lower levels of it, or at earlier levels of education. But by the time folks get to college, and especially a professional degree, they're ready to come out with a credential to get the job that they think they have to get. And so they have been trained for the score and to be the instructor's space to build. There's a challenge of facilitating people's participation with each other when there's such a task goal orientation. And maybe that's what you're talking about in developing this game. There are slots or places for people to contribute in ways, but even maybe it goes to what Roger said, is that you know, the conflict is bound to happen. And so those are the learning experiences. But I've definitely found it challenging in classroom projects and working together when there's a remedial aspect to the work that needs done, because there is a base skill level that folks need to be able to contribute at.
You know, I just wanted to add to this discussion. I think when we're talking about solving problems in education, it looks like, you know, our kits or, you know, for solving problems almost in every arena is not adequate. You know, our governance models, our educational model, democracy, you know, everything is kind of industrial age. Education is a model that was really based on those needs of that society. And when you look at how much has changed, I have worked with international organizations, and when you look at the structure of the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and United Nations, you know, these were really there to solve specific problems. And now the expansion of technology and the way media works and has completely changed this whole environment. And so we need to rethink our toolkits that are not adequate for those. And obviously education is a very good example of that. So I think that it gives, like, you know, we probably should define the problems more adequately and find out whether our solutions are adequate and not create externalities or that are worse than solving the problem itself. So, I think that's probably something hopefully we can discuss more and come up with some solutions.
Afzal, I have to ask, would a model like this work in Afghanistan in rebuilding education there?
Well, yes, I'm sure it will. Afghanistan, unfortunately, right now is kind of in a crisis situation. So it's the basic survival of people for basic needs, which is at the top of it is security. Right now, with the Taliban going back, we had semi-stable society, but then that is going to get disrupted. I think the education in Afghanistan, unfortunately, after the introduction of tremendous amount of money into that society, we never had private institution for education. They were all government run. They basically had, good models. Now we have private institutions that are there, and nobody's checking their credentials, how they teach, what they teach, and it's based on really profit and money. And I'm in contact with a number of those institutions inside the country. I, from time to time, have talks and seminars. So I think it will take a while for us to educate people to say, okay, well, teaching is really coaching. Learning is a process of discovery, and we need to allow more independence in school. I think all of us have experience of how horrible it is for some of the kids that are brilliant but don't fit in this model, and then fail and have bad grades, and then we judge them based on that. And then that is also true in Afghanistan. So I think maybe just a variation of this based on the realities in that country could definitely be beneficial.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to because we have flirted at times with non-quantitative assessment of students, and like I did my undergraduate work at UC Santa Cruz, where in addition to my letter grades, I had a written evaluation from every class I took, right? Because they're kind of the lefty progressive kids in the UC system. What I found, is pretty predictable when it came time to apply to grad school, right? Those evals went nowhere, right? And because when you scale things up, numbers become really, really useful, right? If you're looking at 10,000 applicants, and you need to choose 10 of them to admit to the program. And what are you going to do with 10,000 sets of qualitative evaluations, right? You can't put that in a spreadsheet. You can't, and somebody's got to sit there and look at them. So for big scale organizations, I think the need to put numbers to things is not something that's going to go away. And my experience, I've just recently left my first real big corporate kind of job, small job, big corporation. But what I was fascinated to see there was how tenaciously they pursue their record keeping, even to the detriment of the quality of the product, right? It's like if you need to make in this case it was a customer service job, but I was let to know very clearly that the quality of the service you provide comes second to our ability to quantify that success, right? And so I think a lot of what will make a lot of this the hard part is it comes down to questions of scale. A lot of this stuff I think is very easy to envision at the classroom level, or maybe at the school district level, and I'm really curious to hear what people have more experience in the education field at high levels, how you would, especially you, Afzal, like how would you imagine a national scale system that wasn't relying on numbers and rankings to see if it's doing its job or not, if it's succeeding or not. You know, how do you measure
That's
those
a good
things?
question.
So,
I'll briefly, I don't want to hopefully not dominate the conversation, but when I was in Afghanistan in one of my policy advisor roles, I worked with a government organization called IDLO, Independent Directorate for Local Governments. And that body had about 10,000 employees. All the governors, the mayors, and the district governors reported to this body. So I thought I had a very crucial role, and I was hoping that I would create, initially I wanted to call it a Civil Service Academy, because I wanted all the governors, the district governors and mayors to go through a retraining about, you know, how to facilitate services to its constituents, and got into discussion with the Indian government, and they were very willing to actually support that and fund it. My tenure was short. Unfortunately, the priorities of the governments were not there. What I wanted really to do with that was kind of a leadership academy and teach basically people, you know, that all of the civil service issues, all of the environmental issues, the women's issues, all of those could be included into that curriculum. But while they are, you know, maybe getting their MBA or something like that to, for government services. But that was just a model for Afghanistan, because I was thinking this is a very good opportunity. We could bring young people and teach them and educate them about the needs of people on the ground and how they could be beneficial, making sure that those, we were creating like a one-stop shop for services, those kind of things anyway. But for higher education, I think I would say if we could do sense making, if we could bring synthesis, kind of a dialectical synthesis where you see the other person's perspective and look for value there. And then before you make judgment, if we teach people to think for themselves, I think that goes such a long way at any level. But unfortunately, the model for higher education and education is to produce a labor force. And so we focus on that labor force, and then we lose that people need to make sense of the world around them. And so the environment is getting destroyed. Everything else is, is not working. So that's what I think.
Yeah, and I just a very, very brief response, but I think, one thing that's really important in this conversation and maybe presents some unlikely allies, but the corporate world what you're talking about, producing a labor force, it's failing to do that. Because exactly as you said, it's producing a good industrial labor force, and we don't, at least in America, we're not an industrial, we are a post-industrial country. And I was reading like a Forbes article recently about how, major engineering firms are hiring new, engineers from college. They get these straight A students who get there, and the second they have a new problem, they collapse, and they have to fire these people. And they started looking at this one company, started looking at who have we kept around? Who are our high performers from the last cohort? And people we know we're keeping, and a lot of them, did not do well in school because they were too busy in their garage tinkering, right? And so I think that there's actually, a definite possibility that the people who will be on board, to redirect things may not be, may not be the public sector, right? It might there might be alliances to be made, or with the corporate sector, because they want creatives, they want communicators, they want people who can see opportunities, all these things that our schooling is militates against. So anyway.
Real quick off of that, there's a problem with trying to quantify everything, attach a number to a person or to your ability to do something. And oh, by the way, Ethan, thanks for joining. Since you're leaving.
Thanks for the invite and a pleasant surprise to the morning. So enjoy. Thank you.
Good luck. Real quick, back to this. So this idea, and I think I brought it up in this last meeting, even when I introduced the phenomenon that I had witnessed in my class, because when I conferred with my friend about the phenomenon that I thought I was witnessing, and he told me this sounded an awful lot like what he was reading about in chaos theory, I thought this is fascinating. But the problem with research in that area is, how do you quantify like the feeling of everyone feeling engaged or wanting to participate or feeling excited about their future or having an idea or solving a problem? You can't give a number to that. And so I've thought of some possible ways around this, a portfolio of your work, maybe some essays about your future plans, or just being able to physically show that I've worked with certain students around the world. I'm talking about from the point of view of the student. I've worked with students from around the world on these projects, and these are some solutions, and you may or may not need post-high school graduate studies to do that. You may need it, but I don't know how we mentally shift past this, because I think now with the global problems that we're seeing, with a lot of systemic things collapsing around us, and maybe Vlad can speak to this, how liquid democracy might solve some of this. But we're at that point, I believe, right now, and that shift has to start in education, with a mindset and maybe getting past this quantification of everything through grading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Vlad, did you want to?
Well, yes, I'm still thinking about this. How was it? Publishing industrial complex? No, educational. Yeah, industrial complex. Because I'm a military historian in my basics, so I'm often thinking about the military industrial complex, which is like a very horrible thing in many ways. And I see these institutions as very centralized institutions, depending on special interests, on opportunism, on more or less kind of corrupted behaviors. And this is why I think that the wonderful thing we are doing is kind of in the opposite direction, and in a much better direction. Because when I became member of the I mentioned the Seeds decentralized cryptocurrency community, I was informed that the idea is basically that community creates money, and then money can be used for projects and for development that are, let's say, beneficial for humans and the climate. And one of my first, let's say, radical ideas was like, well, guys, let's create a decentralized university and offer courses and education to people around the world, and not only offer them education but reward people for attending courses and other educational occasions. And of course I was told at that moment, because the community is still very small, so we don't have enough expertise or human resources to start a decentralized university, but just an idea that like universities neither have to be private, nor do they have to be government managed. And the same thing with, let's say, with publishing or education. It doesn't have to be by the government, by let's say private institutions, because it can be, let's say, co-created by humans directly, and can be like connected to different aspects of life and society. So the thing is like the game here it's kind of, I'm just thinking about the document you showed in the beginning of the call. Like basically it's educational methods that don't have to depend on centralized institutions, but they can be created bottom up, created in a very decentralized way. And yeah, so that's kind of the whole spirit of the idea, so to say.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I was going to ask, follow up with Sandra on an issue of practicality. Let's say some students who got interested in a project of this sort and wanted to self-organize around it and build their own, even their own school, or just take this project and just run with it through 4 years of, I don't know what you call it in Europe, the equivalent of high school.
Mhm.
How practical is that?
Well, in my country, it would depend on what school you visit as a student. Mostly it would not be possible, not at all, because there's a curriculum and you have to succeed on that, and there's nothing possible. And that is also the fact because to my experience, teachers are very, very afraid of trying something new, working together with colleagues. Not everyone, but many are. They are in the classroom, they take their book and they say, we have to, this year we have to at the end of the year, we have to be at page 235, and that's it. And if students have new ideas, it's disturbing to them. But there are also schools that would love to do it. There's a kind of school here that's called Technasium. That's in two, we don't think in letters, but in A, B, C, D students, but it would be the A and B and C, A and B students, I guess, for them. And they solve problems that they, well, they get handed, well, for instance, there's a zoo director that comes to the school and says to the students when they are 12 or 13, we need a new cage for the monkeys. Please develop one, and what would it cost, and what materials, and how big, and so on. And they do that, and then the director of the zoo comes back, and 6 groups of students present their ideas, and he chooses one and really makes that thing. So they would be, I think the Technasium would be glad to have such. They would say, okay, if you want to do it, let's give it a try. But most, and there are some experimental schools here in the country, but most of the schools wouldn't. No, it would not be possible. No, you have to work the curriculum. And in other countries, I don't think, as far as I know, it would be in every country an experimental school or one type of school that would say, yes, okay, let's do it. But most of them, no, not here in Europe, no.
Yeah,
I think. Go ahead, Lee. Sorry.
Ben, what did you say?
I was just going to say, yeah, I think, based on the institutional terrain is pretty inhospitable, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and my kind of the point I was making about quantification is that this is something that large scale organizations must do. There is you can't be the Secretary of Education for the United States and not have numbers for your students, right? So, so my point wasn't like, oh, we must stay quantifiable. I think, the solution will be to do it in a grassroots way, right? And I think given that our schooling systems are primarily public schooling systems, it may not be the end product here may not be something necessarily that ever goes into a classroom. And if the right platform was developed, it could be something that students engage with completely outside of school, but towards the benefit of their education. And if it shows good results, you see that those students are simply performing better, right? And it's fun. And there is an excellent model for this out there. Does anybody know Fold It?
What?
No.
Repeat that.
It's called Fold It.
No.
Is this new? Okay, so this is I think a wonderful model. So I'm not a biochemistry guy, but so don't ask me any questions about what I'm saying. I don't really understand this, but essentially all medical research, or most of it, anytime trying to develop a vaccine or anything like that right now, the big problem you have to solve is how proteins fold. They have shapes, very complex shapes, because they're made of all these different molecules or different atoms, and they will do certain things physically. And the way that they will move and fold with each other, it determines, whether this vaccine will stop the virus or whatever. So it's a monumentally complicated task to see, because again, these shapes are so complex and there's so many of them. So this organization, I don't even know what they're called, but they put out a game. There's a free game that you can go play on the internet, where you just try and fold proteins, and people do it with no incentive, right? They don't, there's no reason to do it other than it's fun. And they have actually successfully cracked major breakthroughs in medical development. There are proteins now that they know how they fold, just because 8 million people on the internet went ahead and did it, and it's shown to be more powerful than AI and more powerful than any expert sitting there, reach out, because it's scaled up so well, right? That they could put forth a relatively simple, accessible platform that kind of anybody could engage with, and gather all of that data. So I think that may be something, an alternate model, right, like to consider as a something that is outside the school system entirely, and not let education kind of necessarily be confined to that box, because as we know, it's kind of a prickly box. So yeah.
So Ben, you bring up a good point. I'm glad you brought this up too, because this makes me think of one thing in particular, which is that we have all these single subject areas, but we don't have that one class that tries to find the connection between everything and then apply it, right? So this could be that one thing, which is, all right, now take everything you've learned. Let's find a project or a way to synthesize all of our areas of intelligence, all the things we've learned from different classes, put it together in a project, bring it to the world, show them what, you don't have to quantify it by numbers, but you can perhaps show it by, here's what we learned, these are the problems we've solved, here's how we can apply this, here's how we can use this right now in the world. And so that sounds appealing to me. And if every student felt that they could contribute something, in some way, because we didn't even bring in the arts, but there is a place for everything. You could compose, a theatrical production that explains what you learned in that class, or a composition or a piece of art. You could solve
and here in the Netherlands, there's an experimental school, successful one, that starts with the subject of the student. And then he or she has to apply that to the agora model from the ancient Greeks. So, someone chooses the pyramids of Gizeh, someone chooses, I really chose lucid dreams. I want to know everything about lucid dreams. And then they said in school, go ahead. And then he had to apply it to 6 forms of, let's say, the social aspect, the physical aspect, the spiritual aspect, and so on. And all the students are very, very enthusiastic. They don't want to have holidays. They say, I cannot have holiday this week. I have to finish my project. So they are so very excited about it.
That's interesting to me what you just said there, because in theory, right, when you say I can't have holiday, meaning not be in school, it sounds like there is still some reason why they cannot do this or they cannot or don't do it in their own time, right? Why should holiday be a barrier to them working on this? Is it just about the physical infrastructure of the school is necessary for it to take place?
Yeah. Well, they want. I heard from one school 2 or 3 students say the same thing. and they want to go physically to the building and be with their classmates and work on that project. And why should I stay at home and sleep or what?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great point. And it is the same phenomenon, by the way, that I witnessed in the years that I did this project, where it was the end of the school year. And I was telling students, like, I'm packing up my room to leave for the summer. And they had plans for, well, we want to do this, and now we'd like to work on this. And ideally, we would have a way for them to turn this into a 24/7, 365 thing, so that even if the teacher isn't there, they can continue making progress whenever they want.
That's what I think is, in some way, the acid test of success, right? Is when, you know, it's something that a motor you can turn on, and once you see it's turning over, walk away and know it's going to just run along without you, right? You know, that after a certain point, it achieves a state such that it needs no further input from an authority. And I feel like the situations you guys are describing are on the cusp of that, right? And I can certainly remember kind of similar experiences, you know, as like, oh, that was so much fun. Like, oh man, I love that class. I want to just, you know, but still then there's a barrier that I think is drilled really hard into our brain, which is that, you know, you walk out of the classroom and all of a sudden somehow that stuff doesn't work anymore, right? That it doesn't make sense to continue it in this other context. And this is something I talked to you about, Lee, but you know, I found in my teaching experience, the most important thing was to convince students that they are not in school, right? Like, just do whatever I could to break the school frame. And usually that would mean I had a few techniques. Sometimes I would do things like, you know, just simple stuff like, say, make up find a petty rule to break, right? And let the students know, hey, listen, guys, don't tell anybody we did this, all right? I'm going to be in trouble. Engage them in a conspiracy, right? Then all of a sudden, you know, that changes the nature of the room, and things like that to try and, like, you know, devalue the educational frame, right? And get them thinking like their normal selves, their day-to-day selves, which are much smarter than their school selves. You know, so this is a huge part of that, I think, is just exiting a system that you know is kind of has a huge institutional gravity behind it and inertia, and it really is designed to diminish students' sense of initiative, right? And the more you can do to avoid the whole thing, the better.
All right, so
Roderick,
my point.
We'll get to you in just a second, Demetrius, but it looked like Roderick had his hand up. I wanted to capture that moment.
I was thinking the same thing as you did, the last speaker, when you went into it. The whole point is, like, we're in a situation where right now people are fighting over whether people should go back to the office or work out of home, as if it's some kind of the tradition is good, or what the findings are seem to be good. And the findings are that, you know, business ideology and business science are totally opposite. And the business science is when you're unsupervised, you can often do more work. Now, we've got a situation where kids and humans have to go to work for 40 hours a week or whatever it is. But that's going to change, because most of what it seems to me, most of what we learned at school, or we are learning at school, is probably about 20 or 10 hours of work. So in dance, there's a difference between choreography and the elements that you learn. Choreography is learning a stream of bits and pieces and putting them together. And you can do endless, you can make a lot of money teaching people that. But you can also make a lot less money by teaching the elements, like how to turn, how to walk, how to be upright, how to move from different parts. These are elemental. So instead of, like, replacement, in order to go beyond, maybe what we need to do is have elements that are available to people, that includes the students, that they can, in the way you said, that kind of I call it coversion. So instead of, because it's covert and it's converting people and it's about collaboration. So that whole idea of like, here's this thing, this crazy thing that whoever are telling you not to go to. And it's one of these elements that if we had some powerful elements that we haven't any idea of how to design right now, but we certainly have some information, and we're going to replace or go beyond in a very progressive way, and then find what are the conservative elements that were there before. What is it that, why is it that some teachers at our school, we can remember things they said verbatim, and other ones we just feel a resentment towards and we can't even remember what they look like. And all we're trying hard to do this education thing. But it's that whole thing, you know, what are these like planets that we can create that people can get to on the internet or by gossiping about them? Because there's been a lot of lateral communication amongst, say, millennials, you know, when they got iPods and those became iPhones, there were things you could do with an iPhone or an iPod that was not published by Apple. It's just that kids would, when they meet, say, hey, you know, you can do this thing, look what I found. And the other person would say, oh yeah, I looked at, there's 3 minutes of interaction, 2 things have gone past from one to the other. 2-3 minutes. 2-3 minutes times into 40 hours a week, you're talking about a massive like shift in energy and the use of the mind. So just a little bit of that. I mean, when I went to school, we had to do things I didn't like. There was a military thing. So I did art instead. I put a lot of effort into it. I didn't realize in order to be one of the few people doing that. There were games I didn't want to play. Cricket's one of them. How about replacing cricket with something else? You know, and all it is a site or a group of people that started off. And then this whole configuration comes together because it's self-organizing if it's got substance, just like it's self-organizing if it makes lots of money or tricks people. Those things come together. So you get a constellation instead of a bunch of planets.
So really quickly off that, before we get to Demetrius, there's a psychological component here that we haven't addressed that maybe we can hit in our next meeting, which is that to some teachers, believe it or not, certainly some administrators, if you are seen to be enjoying the process of education, that this is too enjoyable, some would think, well, they can't be working as hard as we did, or they can't be working as hard as their grandparents did, because it's not hard. This is not hard work. They're not, you know,
industrial society mentality.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have to overcome this obstacle that says, well, that it's okay to enjoy it. It's okay to have fun.
That's exactly where I started with the prejudices of people about their work and about education.
That you did an all-nighter, what they call an all-nighter in college. You didn't go to sleep because you had that paper due the next day. I have plenty of those kinds of stories, and it makes me angry to this day when I think back that should have amounted in something, but that was not me. It was you know, the problem with the system. So I don't want to cut into Demetrius's time. You still have that thought in your head from before?
I hope so. Yeah, my perspective on the stuff is in such a state of flux. It's hard for me to just like to say firmly what I believe in this chat, in this discussion, because you know everyone says it's pretty much in the ballpark what I believe. There's nobody in this room that you know is way out there in my opinion. So this is what I'm seeing so far. I just finished the bulk of our credential program and teacher credential program, and the pedagogy they taught us, or the literature, pretty much agrees with everything we said. So I mean, one thing we learned was a lot of this already knew, but this will be learned in the program. Self-determination theory just basically means, kids are hardwired to learn, and it's enjoyable for them to do this because this is how their brains are hardwired to absorb information and to think critically. It just happens. Obviously, you need to use different kinds of scaffolding with it, but that's what kids' minds are there to do, because kids need to understand the tribe they're in and the social norms and customs of it as soon as possible in order to be able to be functional in society. So it's hardwired, basically. So that's something I think everybody would agree with. If you hinder that process, you're hindering, basically. Another thing is, in the literature, it says, for exceptional learners, obviously they talk about learners with disabilities, but they also talk about how to teach children who are so-called gifted. I have a little problem with that because it's sometimes hard, it's hard to tell what gifted is, but there definitely is, at least when the teachers are training these days, they're definitely emphasizing teachers will look out for those kids who are not fitting into the mold of whatever system is put in place. Also, there's a lot more emphasis on English language development because you have a lot of people from other countries and you have minorities who are not maybe speaking the status quo English language. So I want to point out that at least in California and how they're training the teachers, a lot of that is right in line with what everyone's saying. Second thing I want to say is, I've been back in the US about 3 years now, and I have not, taught officially as a full credential teacher yet in America. I'm about to do that in the next few weeks, but I have been doing a lot of subbing, and I did have a long-term position at a school where I was helping at a high school where I was definitely tutoring and helping students over a long period of time. So I've been around, at least in the greater Sacramento, is that in terms of schools, so let's talk about charter schools for a moment here. So some charter schools are very much aligned with the things you're saying. Obviously, everybody in this group is pretty progressive. So they're still behind what most people in this group want, but they're moving in that direction. Other charter schools are the opposite. There's one charter school I worked at for a long-term sub position, and their motto was "Restore America's heritage." Let me translate that for you guys. Make America great again. So it was kind of an ultra-nationalistic themed school, reminding me of China, kind of. That exists too, okay? The regular public schools, my impression is, at least, again, the socioeconomic area I was in was the Rockland area. So Rockland, Roseville. So yeah, that's right, the Donald Trump school. Literally. That was in the chat box when I wrote that, but where was I going? Oh yeah. So at least for the public schools I was in, they seem to slowly be moving in the right direction, just slowly. And the way I gauged that was how teaching me when actually schools myself and how they're teaching now. And I've also, the last 3 years, I've interviewed many teachers to see what they're doing. And there seems to be kind of a recognition that we should be moving in the direction that pretty much everyone's saying here. That said, I have met teachers who are more conservative. I don't mean conservative politically. I mean conservative in the sense of, the old Victorian industrialist era kind of thinking. I've met them, and habitually, maybe conceptually they agree with us, but habitually they're not there yet. They're set in their ways. They've been there long enough. They're not interested in changing. One more thing I want to say is so I'm becoming very intimate with the Common Core curriculum. Before I came back to America, I was hearing a lot of people complain about Common Core. And I came now, and there's some people who complain about it. But honestly, when I look at what Common Core says, go look at it. Type in Common Core. There's a webpage I can give you too if you want to look at it. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with Common Core. I look at it, everything, you go down the list of what Common Core is. I think everybody would agree that these are the skills we should be learning. So I don't quite understand. And you can do this you can do Common Core, I mean, all the requirements within the framework of the complex adaptive theory that Lee promotes, or within a constructivist framework. So at least for California, I'm seeing movement in the direction everyone's saying. That being said, I'm about to actually go into and be a full-time teacher in a school. Again, this school deals with a lot of minorities, but I'm about to see a little more how this works on more of a teacher's level in America. Now, the rest of the country, I'm sure if you go to the middle of America, at least from my total accounts, and also research from academics in those areas, probably it's going to be very different than California and how they're operating, especially have very conservative, more conservative religion in control in those part of the countries as well, and also more of an ethno state still going on there in terms of a lot of institutional racism. More of that is taking place still in the middle of America or the South. So yeah, and one thing we're not touching here is just inequality and stuff in this whole situation. So I'm gonna say one more thing here, but inequality is, I'm all on board with making change and all that kind of stuff, but I just want to make sure that part of the package is universal pre-K and universal college, at least in America, and tech school, and also making sure communities that are not white and the poor in general are having the same access to whatever new system you put in place. If I was in government as a senator or a congressperson, I would probably even, if you were to say, hey, Demetrius, here's this new complex adaptive thing we want to put, will you vote for this? But there's no provisions in there that say that do anything about inequality. I would have to vote it down, I guess. Because otherwise you're just making the rich smarter, the rich and upper middle class smarter, and people at the bottom are not going to progress intellectually, which is a human rights issue. So,
all right. So speaking to that real quick, unless you had more to say, one of the ideas that occurred to me over the last several days really was that the building of this project shouldn't be any different than the way it was implemented in the classroom, meaning the students would rise up to form their project. But in a similar way, when someone like yourself comes up with an idea, bringing in equality into the equation, I would call upon you to make sure that we insert that into our 2.0 final draft of this. So that would then become your area of interest or expertise or passion. And I'm putting that call out to all of you guys now that it's an option. You can choose to take it or not take it. But if you have something you'd like to be included in our final draft, then I would say run with it. That way we make it's, because the idea, for example, of having go ahead.
Wait, it sounds like you want to do more of a grassroots thing, right? Where you build up and you move up, right? Kind of thing.
That's a new conclusion that I started thinking more about the last couple of weeks, that I had to get away from the I and get into this we, because it was the same frame of mind that I was in at the beginning of this, where I said, you get rid of this feeling of I have to be in control of my class, that I have to be way up here and that my students have to be down here. Let's see what happens when we level it and have an honest, to Roderick's point, let's have an honest dialogue and have a cumulative effect, the sum being, or the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. And let's experiment with a joint creation.
Well, when are we going to invite students to our discussion?
That's a great question. How do we do that?
Well, I can, as I get going here, I can bring some here maybe, but there has to be consent.
Right. So I did want to get to a couple of very practical things happening right now, things in this discussion, which is that right now I'm doing a fundraiser so that we can get videos like this edited and out there to create some momentum to bring, for example, bring students in who are interested so that we're calling out in an area. If somebody hears something that they're interested in, they would join our conversation. They would help us complete some type of a product for people to use. And, and in terms of the competition, this will also help to have some presence, that it's not any one thing, but it's really part of a larger body of ideas that we would like to see out there. And so this way we can push, we can see what's going to form. It's emergent in nature. We don't even know what the concluding product might be.
Well, I think if we mustn't make the mistake in thinking for the students if we want them to think for themselves. So they have to be included before we produce anything that goes out into the public, I guess.
And maybe that's why you're here today, because otherwise that would not have entered into the conversation, and it should be part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I hope I was here also to say that that we have to be busy with the teachers and the principals.
Yeah.
And really reflect on what am I afraid of? Am I afraid of change, or what? Or what would I have to learn to do this? That's also a main goal for me to be here.
I'm sure with in the American context, many teachers would be asking themselves, do I have to go to the stationery store and spend more of my money on this? Like I just spent my own money on doing my job last week, right? These are these nitty-gritty practical concerns that I think that I think just in general, it's easy to sort of take the position that, the way that we're doing it right now is nothing more than inertia, right? Or just short-sightedness. I do think there are very real concerns, right, that drive the way our schools are done. Not that my point is not to say that, so they've already figured it out and we should do it their way, but just that you have to take seriously the reasons why things are the way they are now, and we don't want to wind up in the kind of boat that, as an analogy, that America went into Iraq to go build democracy there, right? Which we did successfully, and we're completely shocked that it's a jihadist parties, are coming to. Of course, they were going to do that. And this thing about Trump and that we touched on here, I think there's a really excellent public thinker called Jordan Hall who's been very influential on me. And he speaks about something called the blue church versus the red religion, and it all has to do with centralization versus decentralization, and it's kind of trying to account for what is happening politically in America and across the world right now, and what we can call the left, say, for provisionally speaking, the sort of mainstream left respectability politics, right? There's some words that you used to be able to say and you can't say on TV anymore, right? That's kind of what it comes down to. And its main purpose is to create a platform where people are on the same page, so that we agree what facts are, right? There's no question about how to spell this word. You go to the dictionary is written by experts. They have the correct spelling of it. and that essentially that big infrastructure of major news networks, mainly news outlets, right, has collapsed. And what Trump did so successfully is harness horizontal communications. And he does a very interesting breakdown of of how Hillary Clinton's Twitter structure looked like in terms of who she retweeted and who retweeted her, and looking at Trump's. And basically, Hillary's was very hierarchical, right? She sends out a tweet, it gets retweeted by a couple of surrogates, and then retweeted by the populace. Trump was very skillful and savvy about the nature of grassroots communication and organization. And what he figured out how to do well is to simply amplify. He would retweet people all the time in ways that let him avoid responsibility for the things he was retweeting. And also to create a conversation, create this incredible sense of investment. A big part of the country felt in Trump as their champion and somebody who understood them and understood what they care about. Again, there's a big values difference there, but I don't think we can naively assume that democracy will or liquidity, if we want to call it that, will look like what we want it to look like, right? What with all of our progressive values, we hope that it will. Democracies are real good at producing dictatorships, right? Unless there are solid systems in place to militate against that. That's a big, big thing to think about.
It's a scary thought.
I'll be leaving pretty soon. Just a couple of points I wanted to make before I leave. I think, there are very good points made by everyone. What I'm thinking is that I think it looks like education is just not classical in the classroom anymore because of the mass media, the way they function. So I think any models that will educate and raise sense-making in TikTok and Facebook and, any number of these things, probably the way their models are made. And also on the policy side, education has to become a central point for the government, because I work with the San Juan School District here in Sacramento, which is one of the largest districts. And I feel so horrible for teachers. I mean, they are absolutely overwhelmed. There's the constraints of the Common Core and things that they have to meet in the influx of tons of immigrants that don't speak English, so they have to meet those needs. And then in addition to that, they have to think about all of what we are talking about. And it is overwhelming for them. So I think, the ratio between the teacher and the number of students is critical. I've looked at a number of models. I think there's so many models in the world for education, people that have thought about this. There's one model in India that I went and visited. It's in an ashram called integral education. And they have a school system from kindergarten to university that's completely exam and test free. There's no tests.
Right.
They produce very, very bright individuals, and they do focus. They have specific principles. For example, they say there's a seed of intention in every person, and they need to find that seed of intention. And their model is based on learning, not teaching. So the ratio is such that the teacher knows how students learn, and they really look at the psychological aspect and also developmental stages of kids and what to introduce next. So they look at that very in an integral way. And I mean, I can share the book that this guy wrote, Saradalu Renaid. He has given some speeches too. We have used some of his models in our schools when we was in Afghanistan. So, and I know there are some, like the Finland model is also, they have very good models there. But, so those models plus Lee, what you're doing, kind of integrate those into, those principles into this. And then, when they go out, then hopefully we don't repeat or reinvent things that have already been in practice in some places already. So with that, it's a joy to know all of you guys and be in contact. Hopefully we can continue this conversation. And I have to go, and that's wonderful. And thank you, Lee, for.
Yeah, thanks for your contribution. I really appreciate it.
Hey, nice to see you again, Afzal. I haven't seen you in a while.
You too, Demetrius. Thank you.
Yep.
We'll have more of these, so stay tuned.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye, Afzal.
Yeah, since I know we've been on the call for a while, I just wanted to wrap up with a couple of things because I wanted to respond to Ben's comment real quick about the politics of this, and that I believe it's possible. I think we're in the middle of a communications crisis in the United States. People are talking about the political crisis and the political correctness problem, but they're not talking about the problem in communications, which is that there is a kind of non-ideological language that you can use. You can use it in education, and you can use it in community programs too. By the way, Sarah, are you taking off? Oh, not Sarah, but Sandra.
I think she already left.
Oh, I didn't know she was leaving. Okay. So there is this other way to present information that's not threatening, because you can't take a political stance, at least in a public school. So you'd have to be open to anyone, regardless of where they are on the spectrum. And you allow them to kind of contribute their idea in the marketplace of ideas and see how it does, how it fares. And they'll know if it's popular or unpopular. So that's one thing. For example, when I introduced this self-organizing taxation idea, where there was, I think I talked to Vlad about this, where you have 10 categories for tax obligation. And you have an app on your phone, and it tells you, based on your income, this is what your obligation is. And then you choose, you have to get one in each of the categories. But then after you satisfy that, you have this amount of money, and you can put it like into arts, you can put it into military, you can put it wherever you want. I've tested this idea on libertarians, progressives, and it's non-ideological. And so in that same way, this game can be, yeah, we'll find a niche for ourselves in this somewhere. Yeah. And that way, because in order to be adopted, this has to come across as it's not being politically motivated.
Yeah. I think just to kind of clarify where I was coming from on that is like, what everything that we're talking about, this communication breakdown we're seeing, in this sort of post-truth era, right, is that people no longer can agree on what is even true or not. And I think, I don't want to make it a conversation about that, but I think it applies analogically to the situation here, where the more you lay down your authority as a teacher, right, and say, hey, it's not about me feeding you knowledge, right? You guys have to come up with the answers. You still have to, maybe you don't have to, but I think we're presuming that you still retain the ability to say X is true or not true, right? And that truly, the democratization of information has really come along to a large extent, with a breakdown in any kind of shared understanding of simply what are the facts. You can put something in an apolitical way, but if people won't agree that yes, yesterday was Tuesday, then there's not much you can do about that. And I guess the kind of thing I'm thinking about right on the ground is, like, let's say you have a classroom where a student is reenacting the Holocaust, right? And that becomes popular. that starts drawing, other students to them. And what do you do as, I don't think it's safe to assume that that'll never happen, right? That's something ugly and nasty, and that you as a teacher are going to say, I don't really like the look of that. Yeah, how do you address that then within, without undermining the the non-hierarchical organization that you're striving for?
Did anyone else want to make some final comments off of that, or just tangentially?
One thing, we've been reading this book, Impro, by Keith Johnston, who is one of the most influential people in the world that's unknown. He's fairly dictatorial about Impro as a personality, because he knows he's a good teacher and he spent a lot of time having these insights. And I would encourage anybody to read his book, well, either of them, but especially the one, which one is it? It's not the storytelling one, the other one.
Just Impro.
Yeah.
Huge.
Just because it talks about how to be authentic through various games and things. And it's a hard thing. I knew we were talking about fun, and improv can sometimes, looking back on it, I look at it and I go, wow, that was a horrible time. If I looked at all the things that one tends to look at. But at the time it seemed okay, because I had to get from A to B, and you have to be very disciplined with improv, because you're continually dealing with some kind of people-pleasing character that wants to just get something down and just do that for the rest of life, et cetera, et cetera. But the neat thing is there's a human thing that, having gone through that, even if it is harsh, but if there was that bond to it as an idea or something one pursues, or a group of people sometimes, that looking back, we tend to not remember how hard it was, even when we knew it was hard at the time. And this is the one thing we have in our power, that humans seem to have, that ability to look back on something that's really meaningful and authentic and go, wow, wasn't that a time? And not think about, well, there were these arguments when somebody tried to kill somebody, and say, yeah, but it sorted itself out. And no, it was a great experience, etc. Fitzcarraldo is a great example of that, both the film and the film of making the film.
Yeah,
that's a very extreme version, I think.
I love Keith Johnstone. Impro was a massively influential book for me. It really completely changed how I think about teaching. And one of the things I really liked about it is that, because I think you make a very good point, that he does not, I don't think, discard the concept of hierarchy or authority, right? And I think, these words, when we use them, have a very ugly sound to them, but there's another word that we can use that sounds a little bit better, and it's leadership, right? And I think this is something that I feel is like not quite there yet in what we've been talking about. That I think it's unrealistic to discard the concept of leadership, right? Like that, and that mobs of disorganized people. Sometimes they can do lovely stuff. Our experience has been more that they tend to do kind of awful stuff, right? They're very vulnerable to bad actors, and I think you have to, when creating such a system, you have to assume the presence of bad actors, right? As you're saying, in every improv group, there's that guy who every scene he's got a gun, or whatever it is, right? And you need people in positions to exert some kind of control over them. What you get without that is chaos and not evolution or progress, right? And I think one of the things he talked about that I love is, and you'll probably remember this, he talked about, in order to generate an interesting situation, you do not need a plot, you do not need all you need is a change in status, right? And he's talking about, he teaches you're either high status or low status relative to everything around you, right? And he talks about, I make my students play low status to a pigeon or a bench or they'll start high status, go to low status, go back to high status again, right? And the words can be whatever, but it's what the interest, the drive, the energy comes from is in these shifts in status. And I think that's it's an important part of this whole equation, is that people are going to find that they have advantages in some places, that they're able to exert more power over other students. Then there's inequalities are going to be generated, right? And the hard part, I think, is to have pieces in place to prevent those inequalities from becoming a runaway inequalities, but rather have negative feedback systems to maintain the stability of the system. I think that's the hard part. Yeah.
Ben, off of that, Ben and Roderick, you both brought up an interesting variable. I think that could make this project or game, whatever you want to call it, that much more dynamic and interesting. I think I had told one or both of you this before, that I used to spend some time before class doing kind of what an actor would do or a musician would do, which is to set my intention, set my character, get into focus. What kind of energy am I bringing to the scene? Because when you open that door and you walk in the room, you're setting a tone. You've got a group of people and you're setting that tone. One of the things we could do besides that is a stack of cards that introduces a twist, a variable, like the leader of your country has this character, is either high status, or a low status member has just infiltrated the government. You could introduce these variables which change the character of everyone in that room. So now they've got to react to this rogue element, because these are the things that you're not trained for typically. I don't think they have these role play activities at our State Department or at the Pentagon. When
they actually do. I looked into this. Yes, this is something that if you want to apply for the state service with CIA, they put you in role-playing situations.
Okay, but I mean role play where, because, I remember being at a presentation at the State Department. This is back when I was in DC for this other event in college. And somebody asked, they were saying, well, we have scenarios for several countries in case we're in a conflict. And I think the student raised their hand, well, do you have these scenarios for every country? And the State Department official said, yes. And then the follow-up question was, Canada? Yes. We have an invasion plan for Canada.
Right.
And so, with the students, you say, okay, now you're dealing with like a rogue element in Newfoundland, who's gone rogue and has attacked, the capital in Ottawa. Okay, we hadn't prepared for this. What do we do?
Does anybody know about Oblique Strategies? Brian Eno's card game that he developed when he was doing engineering. Okay, it's worth taking a look at. I think you can buy it quite easily. I've got a copy. I didn't bring it. I was going to bring it down here, but I can show it, Lee. It's cards that are random, but very pointed, or very, very random. That when you get stuck, when you're engineering a project, like working with David Bowie or whoever it is, you just go and use a card, and it throws in a different direction, which you may or may not want to go to, but it adds something. And to look at those in that it's like the I Ching. It's very specific and it's very vague at the same time. And I don't know why, but that's how it is. So that's something to do with adding a new element,
right? And
is
think
external and neutral in a way.
Think of the creative possibilities that a student could have writing these game cards. I remember being at this new school, and it was the first year that the school was built, and I thought, nothing has been established, no rules yet. This is fantastic. I'm so excited. I remember talking to the band director, asking him what he was doing, and he says he was writing the fight song. And I remember being so upset that it was like a cookie cutter. It was like every other fight song in the world, dun, 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 dun. I thought, you should just make this the craziest thing that everyone will remember forever. But just the idea that you can put your stamp on something. Hey, I did the wax stamp that everyone puts on the envelope when they send a secret message to someone. I created the emblem for that, whatever it is. And what is it? Oh, yes, right. Yes, Vlad says, learning by failing.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. So we're about at the end of our time. I think we've gone through just about everything. There's some, like I said, some practical things. I'm trying to raise funds so I can get these videos edited, that type of thing. If anyone wants to speak to me individually, I know, Vlad, we didn't get a chance to talk about how we can even produce some supplemental income through crypto. Maybe like what do they call that? Initial coin offering or something. It'd be nice for those of us working on this that we could achieve some funding to help us. So I'm open to ideas.
Definitely, we have something for the next one.
Yeah, you know how to reach me.
Sure.
Yeah, something for the next time. Yeah, so thanks to all of you. Great contributions today. This is one that I definitely want to put this one out there on YouTube because we touched on so many great points, not only for education. I think people will like this, what we've produced here. I think we'll get some responses.
Excellent conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Good job, everyone. I'll let you know about the next one. And as far as the contest goes, the judges will probably stop looking over material on my website around the 10th, the 15th at the latest. And so this week is kind of my final push. And if anyone wants to help with that, I'm not going to say no. Okay. All right.
So are you still recording?
Oh, I can shut it off.